Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to your lounge. We are back here again today having a chat with a lovely lady, expert in the area of mental health and actually, preventing mental health issues, but also preserving our mental health. Such a big issue today in the world, and so preserving mental health for business owners and for teams. So it's really about being the best leaders we can, but also looking out for the people around us and our team members, because I think mental health affects all of us at different times in our life. Let's face it, we're all in this together, and yeah, so we're going to be talking about that. If you aren't aware, so Your Lounge is a free community, and the link will be in the chat, and we'll pop that there for you. But it's a free community for women in business and women who are looking to release their extraordinary. So we go into lots of different topics around business. Obviously, this month we're talking about health and vitality, and how does that connect to business? And it actually has a very strong connection to business, in terms of how we show up and who we get to be when we're operating our business. And all sorts of things. But in the lounge there, we do connect, we support one another, and that juggling act of life that we have as women in business. We're often doing a million things at once, wearing different hats, and we often feel that guilt, I think, of not being there when we should be there, and all those sorts of things. So I think it's just about doing it together and being there for one another, and helping us to to have that success and drive that we're looking for in our businesses. So love to invite you in there. And as I said, the link will be there below for you. So I would love to now introduce Monique. So Monique is with us today, and she is the co-founder of Be Well Co, which is her business around preserving mental health for organizations and obviously individuals as well, and leaders. So Monique is in charge of operations and oversees the delivery of organizational projects and partnerships with Be Well Co. She's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants and has been on the leadership team of the Samurai Wellbeing and Resilience Centre since its launch, from which Be Well Co actually came from. Prior to Samurai, Monique spent her career at professional services firm Ernst & Young, which probably a lot of you have heard of, and this included working with organisations of all sizes and across industries to improve their performance through a people process and a structural lens. She was also named the Advertisers 2022 Top 40 Under 40 Rising Stars of South Australia. So Monique is definitely recognised as a leader in her field, which is why it's so exciting to talk to her about this today. And her wellbeing routine includes things like hiking and reading, practicing principles of ACT, which is the acceptance and commitment therapy. We'll have to ask her about what that is a bit later, and spending quality time with her young family. So she's obviously juggling a lot of balls as well as a woman in business, and got her family there, and obviously trying to be there for them as well as grow her amazing business, and being there for her team as well. So love to welcome Monique in. Hi Monique, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Belinda.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. It's so exciting to talk about this topic, even though it's I guess you could say it's not an exciting topic in some respects, but I think it's just one that, when we're on top of it and we can look at the benefits of mental health and, I guess being in that state of well-being, then it is exciting for us to help people and to support people being in that, amazing space. So yeah, it's great to have you here, and would love to know, like, obviously you're working with all sorts of organizations everywhere, and what do you think some of the signs are that you're seeing that makes this topic a priority? I mean, obviously with the business that's been born that you're working in, you obviously saw so much need. So what were some of those signs that you saw there with people, leaders, teams?
Yeah, great. And look, I think if I think back to when I joined, so when I finished up at EY, Ernst & Young, and joined SAMRI, that was about, it was probably nearly 9 years ago now, 8.5, 9 years ago. And mental health and wellbeing was just sort of starting to become more of a business imperative. I mean, it makes so much sense. You know, we don't have a strong, high-performing business without high-performing people who are well and who are productive, etc. And all of that links, you know, it sounds so obvious that it all links to our mental health and well-being, but it only really started becoming more on the agenda. But actually, what really made it top of the agenda, unsurprisingly, was COVID, really. I think in 2020, as soon as COVID hit and throughout the pandemic, and even now, you know, we're still, you know, essentially going through that even today. But we found 2020, it just, essentially it became the top of the agenda for everyone, I think, whether it was working from home, whether it was businesses working out how do we change, how do we manage the uncertainty, how do we give people skills to help them support their own health and well-being. So I think on reflection over the past 10 years, you know, really the past sort of 3 or 4 years is when it's really come to the forefront. So I think that was, you know, both a good and an unfortunate thing in terms of, you know, we know more people were suffering with their mental health during the pandemic, which we obviously don't, you know, like to see, but it did give the opportunity for us to raise a conversation that might have been a bit more in the background. So at least it has helped us to all have the conversation more openly and in our workplaces.
Definitely. Because I think, I think, like, you know, a lot of these I guess issues or things were probably there the whole time. It's really brought it forward, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think if I remember, you know, when I started my career, you wouldn't really talk about mental health in the workplace, you know, like it wasn't taboo, you know, but it depends who your leaders were, obviously, and who you're working with. But I think now it's just broadly accepted that it is a conversation that at some point in time, hopefully we all will be having those conversations, even in a preventative way, you know, not necessarily when we hit crisis point, but it's now just widely expected even that people will be able to have these conversations at work. And it's not
that's the aim, isn't it? To really prevent and put in place systems that prevent all of this. So
and look, I think, you know, one of the things we do at Be Wellco is we measure well-being and mental health. And when I say mental health and well-being, we're not talking about mental illness. So mental illness is part of our mental health, but, you know, we all have mental health, you know, just like we have physical health. So a lot of the times you'll say the word mental health and people automatically think of mental illness. But if we said, you know, that we all know that our physical health is much more broad than physical illness. One message we try to get out is that mental health applies to every single one of us every day, just like our physical health. It's not just about mental illness, but I think I think that awareness is becoming more and more, which is great. But there still is a little bit of an education piece that when we talk about mental health, we're not just talking about people who are experiencing illness. But what I was
I've often heard the term mental well-being as well. A bit often heard. Probably is a good way to describe it too. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we're still all learning as a society, you know, because like I said, a lot of these terms just weren't really out there or known. They were by some in some pockets, but if we're talking more broadly across the population. One thing I was going to share is just to kind of, you know, paint the landscape a little bit is just a little bit of the data that we see. So one of the things we do is measure mental health. So that includes measuring mental well-being, as you mentioned, measuring resilience, measuring general health. So they're sort of positive aspects of our mental health. We also do measure symptoms of depression and anxiety and stress, because obviously they are an important, piece of the puzzle. They're not the only piece of the puzzle, but they're an important piece of the whole picture. And what we see from our data, we have about, say, from 2019 to now, we have about 30,000 data points from across Australia. And what we see is that 2 in 3 people at any point in time may have low well-being or distress. So that's a much bigger problem, essentially. And I don't like to call things problems, but it's a much broader issue than the statistic that most of us know, which is the 1 in 5 people is the most commonly cited statistic. 1 in 5 people who have a mental illness. Now that's incredibly important, but actually more broadly, 2 in 3 of us, which is much, much more of us, at any point have low mental well-being and or symptoms of distress. So what that's telling us is, okay, there's a big group of people, and we use the term, and I don't know if anyone's heard this term, but the last couple of years it's become a bit more popular. We say that there's a large group of people who are languishing. So this big group of people, they don't have a diagnosed mental illness necessarily, but they're actually, we know from our research, they're actually at 8 times greater risk of developing potentially more serious problems. But this big group of languishing people, they're not really detected or serviced, because all of our most of our workplace programs, or even the health system, only really kick in when people have more serious problems, once they reach that sort of crisis point and they need to reach out to someone. So part of what we do is firstly just educating people that this is a broader, let's not forget about people who have low well-being or who are languishing. So let's not have these people as invisible. Let's actually, measure well-being, because if we're measuring well-being, we can capture this low well-being languishing group, and they no longer are the forgotten, or if we identify them, we can help support them and give them tools and practical tools and ideas. And, if someone said, well, what exactly is languishing? What does that mean? What does it feel like? The lead academic who researches low well-being and languishing, his name is Dr. Corey Keyes, and he describes it as, a feeling. Sometimes people can feel like they're only half alive, and that sounds pretty bleak, but it's sort of like this, you're not really sure what's going on, but you just know, you can't really put your finger on it, but you know that something's not quite right. And even Brene Brown, who some people may also be into and aware of, I've heard her sort of describe a similar, in a similar way. She sort of says it's a dangerous, it's a dangerous place to be, because sometimes it allows us to just continue as though everything was okay. You're sort of in that feeling of, oh, well, I'll just keep kind of pushing through, and I'll pretend that everything's okay, and I'll run the business, I'll pick up the kids, I'll manage the household, and I'll just kind of keep going, and sometimes that's not a really great place to be, because then we're not really stopping and tackling it before it potentially becomes more of a problem. So that's that sort of language.
Yeah, and I guess with that, like as with anything, it's okay. Maybe, well, it's not like everything is okay, but like if we have a day here and there like that, I'm sure we've all experienced it. You probably don't think too much of it, but if it's day after day for a period of decent period of time,
absolutely,
I think that's when we need to stop and go. It's okay to like, I guess, just acknowledge that we actually are feeling this way and there is something going on, and what is it? Like, be curious about ourselves and what might be there, and reaching out for support. But yeah,
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, no, I'm just going to pick up on that point to not sort of lose that point. I'm really glad that you said, you know, sometimes, you know, we all have good and bad days. So it's really important to acknowledge that it's okay to be low on some days, you know, feeling better other days. That's, completely, you know, all of us feel different emotions and feelings every single day. And like you said, it's really about noticing the longer term, kind of more medium term patterns. But it's totally okay to accept that on any given day, we're going to be feeling different, and that's totally fine and normal. Yeah.
Not to think that there's something wrong with me.
Yeah, that's right.
Even if, you know, at the end of the day, even if someone is experiencing this for a longer period of time, there's still nothing wrong with you, is there? Like, that's the other thing. It's absolutely. A lot of people go through it. So so there's definitely a lot of signs out there that this is a need and popping up, and there's probably lots of ways that we can see that in businesses. So what are people doing, I guess, you know, how are they investing in this area? Like, if people have a business, like, how are they investing in this for themselves? You know, what's the impact of investing in this area for themselves, but also for their teams? What are some of the results, I guess, you're seeing from people noticing this and actually doing something about it?
Yeah, so and it probably differs, you know, obviously larger organizations versus maybe smaller organizations. Obviously that can really differ in the resources we have to kind of, you know, do something. But broadly, we're seeing that this term of creating a mentally healthy workplace, that's sort of a term that's kind of getting more, you know, awareness. Most businesses are now being tasked with, okay, how do we create a mentally healthy workplace? And there's so much, you know, there's so many different strategies that come under that. That can include, you know, obviously supporting people who need treatment and need support. So that's the people, you know, that might be the 1 in 5 that have a mental illness, making sure they're supported and safe in the workplace. But then there's also the preventative and protective strategies as well. And that's making sure that people that might be at risk, you know, have different supports, but then also more broadly that we all have practical skills and tools that we can all use to build our mental health and use those skills as more of that, you know, preventative measure. So there are, you know, there are a whole load of strategies that kind of come under a workplace mental health strategy, depending, you know. But what we know is that organisations will report on whether it's, you know, retention of staff being improved, you know, attracting key talent, you know, in a lot of businesses, employee value proposition, you know, so to speak. When we know that people now, when they join a business, they expect that their well-being will be front of mind and supported. So it's also becoming part of that talent attraction proposition.
Yes.
And we also know that, you know, businesses will report on, you know, a whole range of factors. You know, obviously productivity is one, and every business measures that in different ways. But, you know, lower absenteeism and more and higher engagement. So they're some of the business metrics that we see. And obviously the business metrics are really important. But what we measure, so for Be Wellco, what we keep tabs on in terms of the data, we measure mental health outcomes. So using scientific, you know, research questions and measurements. So what we know from our data is that, for example, you know, a 5-week program that we offer, improves someone's significantly improves someone's mental health scores post undertaking that program compared to right at the beginning of the program. So for us, it's really important to see that the mental health scores are moving in the right direction, that they're all improving. And then we know that if they're all trending upwards, that translates to some of those other business outcomes.
Of course, yes, yeah. And really important to measure it, isn't it? I mean, without the measuring aspect of that, what you just said, it's kind of all a bit fluffy. Oh, yes, I think I feel better. But really, we need to measure these kinds of things. And and I guess there'd be lots of statistics that, like you say, that reflect into the business side of things too, like in terms of employee retention, and things like that. I know, that's a huge thing, employee retention, and businesses are needing to look at different ways they can create that culture and that environment that really makes it a great place to work. I think the younger generations, they just really look for that as a really big thing on their checklist when they're looking to get a job somewhere.
I've heard of I think some people even reporting business leaders reporting that some interview candidates that they've interviewed have actually asked, how is it that your organization is what wellbeing policies or practices or programs. So it's interesting that I think as a candidate maybe 20 years ago, would we have asked those questions? But I think it's a great thing that now they're sort of being asked. Yeah.
It is. It's really, really good because, if we think about it, we spend so much time at work in our workplaces. And if we're not looked after or, if there's not things in place that make sure that we are in our best state of mind, then, life's not going to be that enjoyable. So, I think it's really part as business owners, like speak for myself as well, I think it's part of our responsibility now to ensure that we provide that culture, and so people can speak up, and maybe it becomes about being part of their systems in terms of performance reviews and things like that. Do you find like integrating certain questions or things in their already set up systems so that people feel like they can speak about what they might be going through? Or
and I'm glad you sort of use that word integrate. And another word we use is embedding. Essentially they mean the same thing, where we say we don't just want to roll out a training program, for example, and it's seen as this separate thing. Really what we need, and don't get me wrong, teaching people skills and awareness and education is really important as a starting point. But then what we help people do is how do we embed those learnings into the business as usual and the systems? Because if we're not really integrating that, then it can be lost. Like those learnings aren't sustainable unless they're being embedded both in So that works both ways. That's both the individual embedding practical, skills in their everyday life, both at home and at work, and also the organisation looking at the organisational, policies and practices, etc. So both work hand in hand. What can the person do and what can the business do? They're both really important.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's not all on the business's shoulders, that's for sure. I think at the end of the day, it's our responsibility as people to make sure we're in a state of well-being. But I guess that's where businesses come in terms of providing that opportunity to a platform to speak if there is something that needs to be, discussed or,
Yes, and we sort of say, the business is responsible for having an enabling environment where people can be well and high performing.
Yeah, and that's probably important to mention because, as business owners, we don't want to have that weight on our shoulders of feeling like everyone's well-being is on, it's up to us. It certainly isn't.
It's a supporting it's a supportive, it's a supporting relationship, but you're right, it can. And I think another thing, I love how you're sort of preempting some of the things I was thinking of, which is fantastic, because a lot of business owners at the moment are actually feeling quite overwhelmed with, oh, wow, what is my responsibility? What isn't? I'm not really sure. So that is a really important point. It can feel sometimes overwhelming for business leaders and owners to think, well, where do I start? What should I be doing or not be doing? And that can feel really overwhelming. There's new legislation that's coming out, and I won't sort of go into the detail, but it's around business leaders needing to manage psychosocial hazards in the workplace. So this legislation is creating a bit of it's really important, and I'm glad that we're moving to this legislation, but it can create a sense of overwhelm as well in terms of what are our responsibilities? How do we tackle this? So there is more and more happening in this space for business leaders to at least be aware of as a starting point.
Yes. Yeah. I know. And I know business leaders hate to hear that, don't they? Or another thing I've got to do, another thing I've got to manage. But at the end of the day, that's what we've signed up for, isn't it? As business owners and leaders to be constantly, working in a changing environment and adapting to what's needed. So, yeah.
Yeah, and look, even though it is a complex area, also sometimes small things can actually go a long way. So sometimes it doesn't, yes, it is complex for larger organizations and sometimes smaller ones, but also making people feel, I guess, not comforted for lack of a better word, but that, just knowing that there are some smaller steps and practical steps that already go such a long way. It doesn't always have to be massively complex, things in place. Sometimes they can be really practical. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great, because that was what I was going to ask you next anyway. Like what are some of the things like people can be doing? What are some of the things you offer as well in terms of for smaller businesses and larger businesses? But I know we've talked about a few things that you offer there that can really help people to navigate this. So yeah, what would be some of the things people can do? I guess personally as well as as a business owner.
Thank you. And I think just to sort of give a bit of context around what we focus on at Be Well Co, because this is such a broad area, mental health in the workplace. Our predominant focus area is teaching individuals and teams really practical activities and skills that they can use in their life at work and in their life at home. So that's really, just to give a feel for what our particular focus area is. So, our vision statement is we envisage a world where all people have the skills to build their mental health and work on their mental health and grow through life's challenges. So we want people to feel equipped to be able to face the inevitable challenges in life and grow through those challenges. So what our team has done, because we were born out of a research institute, our team reviewed all of the global academic literature on what are the activities that have the biggest impact on someone's well-being. So we knew that we needed anything we taught to be evidence-based and a very rigorous, a real rigorous evidence base. So essentially that global evidence that the team reviewed has been summarized into different training packages and various formats, etc. But essentially, there's about 30 or just over 30 activities that we know have a significant and meaningful impact on someone's well-being. But the reason why there's over 30 is because what works for me might not be what works for you, or what I find helpful may be different for someone else. And I'll share a couple of examples of what these activities are. But just to kind of set the scene, we try and teach people that mental health is really individual to the person. And We help people to select the different activities that will suit their circumstance. We all have really different circumstances in our life, but what we know is that we can all flourish even despite what our unique circumstances are. So in our unique circumstance, we still can all flourish. So we help people based on their profile to select and try and experiment with different activities out of that evidence base. Unsurprisingly, some of the strongest evidence came through for mindfulness practices. And I know that mindfulness can be a bit of a buzzword as well, that some people roll their eyes a bit and think, oh, mindfulness, what even is it? But
it sounds a bit fluffy, doesn't it? But it's actually.
So what the evidence tells us is it's incredibly powerful, and essentially the definition is paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So it's really about saying, I will focus and pay attention to this moment right here, right now, without judgment. And that can be hard to do, I think, for all of us. It sounds simple, but simple isn't easy, or, simple doesn't always equate to being easy. I think we've all been sort of trained to have our mind in the future or in the past. We're either planning and thinking and planning for the future, which is not a bad thing. That's fantastic. We all need to be doing all of those things as well. But we do know from the evidence that if we all even if it's as small as 1 minute, it doesn't have to be, we talk about what we call tiny habits. If we make these really small, tiny habit changes, they can then gradually lead to big outcomes. But we need to keep them small to begin with, or else they become, again, another chore. So being mindful can be as simple as, a really simple one that I find, if you're in an elevator, for example, at work or at a shopping center, you'll see most people probably grab their phone, or, often, or even if we're on public transport, we're always, it's like we can't really be still anymore. So even just a really small practice of, okay, I won't reach for my phone as the default, or I won't try and occupy the mind just for this 1 minute or 30 seconds. I'll listen to what I can hear. I'll, focus on what I can see. I'll feel the ground or the elevator floor beneath my shoes and my feet. And it's really engaging those senses, even for just a really small amount of time. So look, that's just
switching off the autopilot, isn't it? And becoming conscious. Like, I know I've actually done that several times. I've been sitting in a cafe, or this morning I was waiting outside of a building for someone to come, and the first instinct is reach for your phone, but I actually stopped myself and went, no, I'm just going to just observe. And it was just really interesting. Like, it's just very interesting to try to do that. It's not the automatic. So you have to sort of stop.
Yeah. Oh, it's really tough. And I found it tough, and I still do. We had one gentleman from our program tell us, share a story that he was feeling quite anxious, going into work for various other, reasons. But for him, doing that simple practice on the train in the morning on the way to work completely sort of changed the outlook of the rest of his day. Just doing a really short, engaging of the senses on the train rather than sort of checking the emails all the time or sort of doing other things. By no means is this a silver bullet for solving all of the, challenges we face, but the evidence shows it really does. If we can feel grounded, that might help us to then, when we get to work, how we show up at work. And also when we leave work and go home, those small little moments of mindfulness or grounding then also change how we show up when we walk in the door back going into the home, so sometimes those small moments can make a big difference.
Yeah, they really can. No, I agree. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, so you've probably got lots and lots of strategies. But that would be one simple one lots of people could literally walk away from and do straight away. So
and look, on our website we have a few other activities that we share, and always happy to kind of share more or talk about more. But there's some that are more more involved, which involve some reflection, exercises. That's part of some of the activities that we do. Some that are more practical and involve doing and moving our body. So there's different types, in terms of reflection or writing, versus doing, versus thinking activities. So there's a range of. But I'll give you actually one other really short one, because this is probably the most popular one. Apart from mindfulness, the other most popular one that we get really great feedback on. It's an activity that's called Meaningful Pictures. Now, what this activity is designed to do is it's designed to help us focus on the things we have in our life. So the resources that we have. We know that we have a negativity bias. That might be something that many of you have heard before. So naturally, we are just inclined to focus sometimes on the threats or the negative aspects that we might be faced with. That's just a normal biological response. But using different exercises to at least draw our attention to the resources that we have in our life, that can have a big impact as well. So this Meaningful Pictures activity, it's basically, grabbing out I said before, don't grab the mobile phone, but for this one, we do use the mobile phone. We look back at the last few photos that we have on our camera roll in our phone. Ignore the screenshots, from the screenshots and all that sort of stuff.
Ones.
Yeah, exactly. But often when we do this activity, you can do it on your own, but we find that it's so powerful when people do it in pairs or in groups. So it's a great team activity to do in a team meeting as well. And people will share what is it about that particular photo or picture that is meaningful for them in their life. So it might be a pet, it might be a family member, it might be a vacation, it might be that you've walked that morning in nature. It can be so many different obscure things. But as soon as someone's reflecting on that and sharing that story or, sharing those points with someone else, not only are they tuning into their own life and the resources in their life, but it also connects you with that other person that you're sharing with. So it creates that sort of, it creates that effect of the energy for everyone in the room, really picks up, but also for the person that's been reflecting on their own life and their own, some of the meaningful things that they have in their life already.
Oh, yeah, that's great. And it's just really like taking the time to move from the head space where we're so frantic to the heart space, right? Like just being present and grounded and and coming from that space when we're with those people in the next part, whatever we're about to do. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really good way to do it. Yeah, lots of great tips. And I know that you have many, many more. And people can probably go to your website and grab lots from there. I saw that you do have a lot of resources on there. And I know that you do also, I was going to quickly mention, you do different programs. So people like business owners can come and do a program, or they can train up someone within their organization, probably more bigger organizations or businesses where they might have someone that's their role, to ensure that that's the well-being role of the business or whatever. You'll probably explain it much better than me,
okay.
But they can come and do the training with you, and then that way, that brings that back into the organization or the business too. So, do you want to just talk quickly about the different options there you've got for programs?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you so much. So, so some businesses ask us to deliver different workshops or training to their people, which is one option. But what we're really trying to do is upskill other people to be able to do this in their communities or workplaces, because that then extends the impact of this work if we're sort of upskilling others. And even for smaller businesses, we've got a new option at the moment, which is a much less, I guess, intensive option, because that can be harder for, small to medium businesses, where a facilitator is upskilled to have conversations with their people, and we give, the resources and the guides, but the technical content is covered by really short videos. So they can share with their people some pre-recorded video content that people can watch in their own time and reflect on in their own time. So that at least takes away the sort of technical learning, of the content. But then the facilitator is still equipped to bring those people together, say on a weekly basis, and then have a conversation about what did we learn? How do we think we can use this in our team, at work? How do you think you might use it at home? So, because we know that it's those conversations that really brings everything to life when you're having those conversations as a group. So there are a couple of different options to be able to look at.
Yeah, to really integrate this into what we're doing in our businesses, and also, for people, like obviously individuals can come as well and do the program and for themselves. So that's awesome. Oh, so good. We've learnt so much, and just been so good to chat with you. That time went super fast.
It really did, didn't
it? We do try to keep these chats in the Latte Lounge quite short, just for people to, have time to squeeze them into their day. But it's just amazing how the time goes so quickly. Just love to, if anyone does have any questions, definitely pop those in the chat there now. And I'm sure Monique would absolutely love to answer those. We will put the links as well in the chat for you. So different links that you can connect more with Monique and Be Well Co. Access some of her amazing programs and things that they have there that can help you in your business and support your people as well. So we will do that. I just want to thank you, Monique, for the time. I know we're all such busy people and have full lives. So thank you so much for coming and having this chat with us today. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Belinda, and for all the amazing work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing everyone again soon in the next installment, whatever that's going to be. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.